right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh. That is David Dubine. This is Red Pill Project's Conversations on the Fringe with you tonight, and we're going to be having, I'm telling you, we're going to have an amazing conversation tonight. We're going to be talking about galactic cycles, mini ice ages, political and weather changes, all of this stuff that's happening in the world.
Why are they trying to hide these catastrophism events from us is the question. Because they're on a cycle and you wouldn't pay your taxes or invest and you wouldn't obey the rule of law. Once you knew another one was onsetting, there's nothing else to live for except the day. So why would you worry about 30, 50, 60 years in the future? You wouldn't.
Typically, when we see fluctuations in extremes, when we see something that is relatively low or below normal, there's always going to be a compensatory mechanism that is going to come out of that at some point, especially if it's abnormal to normal behavior. So if we had so many solar cycles of suns, what we call normal behavior, and all of a sudden, like you just said, the last few solar cycles have been kind of like this subnormal, abnormal, very, very low. So you firmly believe that we're going to have these various large fluctuations within the solar maximum cycles?
Well, it's possible we've reached the first peak out of the two for this solar max cycle. Mm-hmm. It just depends if that truly was the peak that we just rolled through and we're going to go into the next peak and then it drops off. It's an unknown, but a lot of physicists and astrophysicists, Piers Corbin, Dr. Abuzamatov, the Pocobo Observatory, John Casey, Valentina Zarkova, and a list of others have said this one's going to peak early and we're going to drop off a cliff, and the average sunspots through this one will be far lower than anybody anticipated. So far, they seem to have been spot on. And that might be all sciencey and everything, but what it really boils down to is, can we grow food enough to feed the planet or not? Because we have 8 billion mouths to feed, and as these climate system shifts and the atmospheric precipitation pattern change based on where jet streams are going to bend or not, then it's going to be more and more difficult to grow the food with the onset of early blizzards and the late let out from spring into our planting seasons. You know, what's affected by radiation? You know, seeds themselves, you know, they're affected by radiation too. They've done an enormous amount of experiments on different electrical inputs into the seeds before they're planted, and they come out with this a different species. Although it's the same subspecies, it'll come out with different leaf count, different amount of flower head count, a different amount of ear corn count. They've done countless experiments on this. Frequencies into the growth patterns, you know, like as all of these things change, the plants themselves, as they're growing, are going to change. Mm-hmm. And the yield out of that will change based on physiological adaptations or morphs of the plants themselves. So as you know, you try to put this into a whole, you know, try to explain this to the average person on the street. And, you know, 2 minutes into our conversation when we first started, you would have lost them. Now, you know, to really try to put this into perspective, like, don't worry about your retirement fund, because it's not going to be there, because the Earth is going to shift so gargantuanly in the next 3 years in terms of radiation, magnetic field, and then physical bolides rolling in from space, hitting the crust of our planet here, hitting the surface of our planet. The disruptions will be so vast across every nation that there will be no structured economy as you understand it anymore. Like, value of something will remain the same, of either labor or food or gold or silver or skills, that will remain intact. But everything else is this internationalized system of finance will not. There might be pockets of it that remain, pockets regionally. But then again, those pockets are going to disassociate for a while until they come back into some sort of larger global type of system. But to try to tell somebody that and get them to just continue going through their daily lives, And a lot of this financial system built up. I really believe that part of the reason that we're not being told or haven't been told about this is to keep the financial system intact enough so the globalists can continue to use the supply chains to prepare for what's happening. Because if we all knew this 20 years ago, the economy right now would not function. There'd be the global economy would have been a shred of itself after 2005.
Now, it seems like a good reason to incredibly reduce the population of the planet prior to this event if you knew that you're not going to have enough food to feed 8 billion people.
Yeah, because hungry people have overthrown every single government throughout history, bar none. Mm-hmm. That's the number one thing that everybody understands. Hungry people overthrow governments every single time.
So you might as well have a switch that goes off before that event happens to where the population is greatly reduced. It doesn't matter who was responsible for it. There'll be no one held accountable because the courts and the political systems and economic systems will all be gone.
Yeah, especially as you roll through these changes. Because you have to think about if there's 8 billion people now, and there's still a couple of years left before we go into the magnetic anomalies, the UVB radiation changes next year. You know, people are going to get angry enough to be able to topple governments if there's still that many of them around during the changes itself. And these actual physical manifestations of energy on the planet.
I'm curious. We talked a little bit about mud floods. There's a vast tunnel system throughout this entire planet. New York City, Portland, France, all throughout Turkey. And these tunnel systems, they say, are a few thousand years old, but artifacts have been pulled out of these things that are 20,000 years old. And some of the ones, especially the ones under Turkey, can house hundreds, if not thousands upon thousands of people. Do you think that this was prior knowledge from another civilization on this planet that took preparations, built these tunnel systems to survive what was coming?
Using quite a bit of the older cultural layer remnants. Now, I'll tell you a story myself. I went to the Czech Republic, and we went out, if you're in Czech Republic, you know, Prague's way out east. If you go to the west out there before you cross the Austrian border, there's a place called Neumo, Z-N-O-M-O, Neumo. And this place had an underground city, which I'd never heard of before. That thing housed 20,000 people, and it connected to another valley, which housed another 40,000 people. This is all through the vineyard area. If you're into white wine and you want to go to Neumo, check it out. Super amazing town. Like the tunnel systems under there were vast, but they were also saying that they got in there and they added to it, but the initial construction of the underground had been there for time immemorial. So yes, I am saying that we are going to reuse some of the previous cultural layers, and you always have to wonder, like, how is it that just like a whole city got covered in dirt or mud, and then we just built right on top of it? Because the old established way that things continued from, say, the Roman era was, well, we just built on top of their cities.
Right.
Well, that makes no sense. Are you going to tear every single bitty building down in a city and then build on top of it? No. The only reason you would build on top of it is because it was either completely buried, partially buried, and then it was a reworked type of construction. Because when you see all these buildings where they cut in the second floor as the door, meaning that entire first floor was buried with mud, it wasn't worth the time to dig it out. Let's just build on top of it.
Well, that's
which comes back to your mud flood again, or global liquefaction event, as I'd like to term it.
Yeah, and we have massive monuments all throughout this world which were buried in mud. I mean, all throughout the planet, as in a whole new layer of soil, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet, 60 feet, recovered the whole planet. How does that happen?
There's 3 times more water in the crust of the planet than there are on all the oceans, rivers, and lakes combined on the surface that we see as we map out on our maps and we look at world maps of lakes, rivers, and oceans. So if there was what we were talking about, pressure differences, that would ooze from beneath the crust, which gives credence to Noah talking about when there were massive water jets, 3,000 feet tall, spewing from within the earth outbound. So again, is it a toothpaste oozing kind of mud event? Will it be sand in some areas? Absolutely, yes. I'll tell you a story here. If you follow the New Madrid earthquakes, there was a New Madrid earthquake that just ripped apart the center of the United States in the early 1800s. There were sand volcanoes in sand emissions so dense across such a vast area. It took them about 60 years to clean it out and get back and flatten those crop fields and the farm fields again to be able to do agriculture. But there was huge 20 to 30, 40 foot deep areas of just sand shooting out of, west of the Mississippi through Missouri, etc. So yeah, there's absolutely things that could, but how would that be disguised? So let me ask you a question, Josh.
Yeah.
Okay, so this event happened, like how would you disguise it and use a different effect for the cause to, get people to look that way and not look at the true cause of the event?
I always look at narrative control as multifactional in the sense that, starting rumors of weather manipulation and we're talking about the New Madrid earthquakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, you could weather manipulation, conspiracy theories, blaming it on the government, these types of things is a distraction that keeps people's minds in a different direction, as well as various different things occurring geopolitically during that time, especially like what we have going on right now, Russia, Ukraine, and China. This is the ultimate distraction. Or just what we had a few weeks ago, balloons in the sky. Don't look up. Oh my goodness, are they UFOs? I don't know. They could be. This is what happens. We just had a major earthquake in Turkey, 6.9, at the same time that these balloons are occurring over our skies and people are looking up instead of looking what's happening with the earth. As well as we had various different earthquakes around the planet at that same time that nobody was even paying attention to.
Yeah, I'll say something about the earthquakes. This is my newest research that I'm doing. I'm trying to present my findings here. If you understand the onset of this grand solar minimum / onset of either once in a 2,000 year or once in a 400 year event, because these 400 year events wrap themselves in sets of 5 into the 2,000 year cycle, but then those wrap themselves into the 4,000 year cycle. And we can continue upward in terms of cyclicity. 25,000 year cycle times 4 is a glaciation cycle. So wherever we sit in that whole overlapping of cycles on top of cycles, more powerful cycles overlapping, it seems that since about 2019, there's been these clusters of earthquakes as Earth passes through the middle of what we will be in the magnetic anomaly at its strongest point in 2024 October. Now, the four gas giants have slowly been working themselves, and they're going to be a perfect square from the visual reference from the Earth, October 23rd of 2024. But these gas giants are slowly moving into their magnetic field interlooping phases. Each year it's been getting more intense. But as the Earth rolls through that, there's been these clusters of earthquakes since about 2019. And you get 4 or 5 really large ones, 7.0 plus times 4 different events, all in a window of about a month to a month and a half. On one, as the Earth passes through that, but then it moves around the sun on the backside, and we'll get another cluster of quakes. You get, 4, 5, 6 really big ones right in that 1.5 month period of clustering. As the Earth moves through this magnetic window, is what I'm calling it. And we just passed through that magnetic window. Was January, February, March is the magnetic window of this particular. And as we move around the backside of the sun, we'll come through it again. But, the realization of the largeness of the quakes as we transit through, and you get these large quake clusters as we move through the magnetic window, and that magnetic field in the outer solar system is going to intensify quickly because we only get one more loop through it on the backside of the sun, and then those planets are going to swing in, and they're going to really start, looping in on themselves on a new toroid field out there. And as we loop through this, we get 3 more passes through the intensifying magnetic field until we hit it. 2 looping fields on themselves, 2 looping toroids, and we're going to pass right through the center of that. There's a term for it called the block wall in German scientists. When 2 looping fields come in overlaying on themselves, and you get into that kind of Bose headset cancellation. Now, it's not an audio wave, it's a magnetic canceling wave. Same principles apply. It's called the block wall or the blosh, depending on how you like to use the accent with that. We're going to go rolling through that in 2024 in October 22nd, 23rd, somewhere around there. So this is really what I'm wondering is, are we going to come to a zero magnetic field point there where resonant fields in the human brain are going to cease, and we're going to either get a download or a full insanity mode on the planet. But at the same time, how's the crust going to adjust to that, and what types of subside raising out of are we going to get off the crust of the planet's surface here? So, you got to realize it's about a year and a half, almost 2 years, or a little less than 2 years away.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because we know that we're due for a magnetic reversal. We're a few 100,000 years overdue for that. I was looking at the Carrington event, which was one of the last really, really big geomagnetic events that we had on this planet. That was about 164 years ago. And we were talking about cycles within cycles. I mean, you have the 11, 12-year solar cycle, and if you do an exponent of that, you get 144 years for one of these big super cycles. Of which I think we're overdue for. And so we are coming into that right now, potentially, where this could happen. And if we go into that zero canceling field, like you said, there's going to be a massive bombardment of cosmic radiation coming into the planet during that time. What could be the effects of that specifically on the planet? I mean, obviously, is this going to produce an electromagnetic pulse type of event? Is this going to produce a Carrington type event, where kind of very similar to an electromagnetic pulse type of event? Is this going to produce cataclysms, earthquakes? Is this the big event that we think that the globalists are looking for and waiting for?
Well, cosmic rays themselves and the sun would be two separate variables that would have the impact. So a step-down magnetic field on the sun would allow more cosmic rays to come in. So let's say we come into a super bombardment cosmic ray event. The quartzite rock would have a huge effect. So that would be affected first. So if you're looking for seismic zones with quartzite rock in there, that would definitely have the largest impact and effect. Proven, there's thousands of peer-reviewed research papers on the effects of cosmic rays and quartzite rock and the Paleozoic effect, which you're referring to. So you would definitely see either more volcanoes in this type of rock layering through the, however many miles down you're going into the crust, or the tectonic effects that would also be in that area along a fault zone, depending on what the crustal composition was. But the sun itself, the magnetic field, a step down, in my opinion, would be two separate things. You're talking about cosmic rays, right, although the amount of cosmic rays that could be let in would also be a variable of how strengthened the solar magnetic field was. But on the physiological side of the human, or even just any species of plant or animal on the planet, like, evolutionary leaps and magnetic reversals. This is a book Robert Felix wrote, who I used to know him before he passed. He was saying that there's at times these massive bombardments of cosmic rays, that there's an instant upgrade or an instant shift. That's why there's no fossil record of a jump from one species to another,
right,
because it was radiation based. And then we start to look at this and scratch the head and say, all right, if we come into something even on a very, 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 very light version in 2024, how will the human react to this? That's the main thing, is how is our brain going to handle extreme low magnetic field, if not a zero magnetic field, and increased radiation on the cosmic radiation side. So we have these two variables pushing on how the human will react to this too. It doesn't have something to do with try to nullify or prevent the effect of the upgrade, because I have a few discussions with people, and they say, perhaps when we come into the zero field, that's where the download comes in, like the consciousness from the great creator is like pushed in on a zero magnetic field, and that is the upgrade. And after the field reestablishes itself, that's the new baseline minimum of that download. And I'm trying to explain it in words that people would understand, versus the universal consciousness flow that will allow you to uptake information, integrate information, upgrade DNA in a zero magnetic field. There's no other time will zero magnetic field, which only occurs once every 2,000, 4,000, 12,000, or 25,000 years.
So Love that, because in that one cycle, the galactic cycle that I was actually talking about before, that rebirth cycle that happens after we hit that winter point, we start moving back up, we change
That's it.
polarization. Yep, and I talk about it like this, is that think about the Earth as a radio station that's picking up 103.5. Mostly all the people on this planet are resonating with that Earth's primary frequency, which is determined by the position in the solar system, its position in the galaxy as per the galactic center, and all the other objects that rotate around it and all this other stuff, but primarily where it is in that galactic flow of things. And if so we think about it as like 103.5 FM, most people are on a bell curve average in the with that. Some people are at 99.5. We know those people. They're fucking idiots, right? Some people are at
Hard rock station.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of those are 105.3. Some of those are 107.9. The people at 105.3 and 107.9 been sitting here going, you guys don't get it, man. There's a whole new world out there. Consciousness, reality. You got to look and expand it. And we're the ones going out there in exotic technologies. We're the ones out there looking at conspiracy theories. These people at 103.5 are sitting there going, what the fuck are you guys talking about, man? This is all crazy stuff. Well, what happens is this planet now is going through this change. As you were just talking, the Schumann resonance is fluctuating. I seen sometimes even in the 60s and the 70s, is that the frequency orientation of this planet, the cosmic microwave background radiation, is becoming more and more resonant with our DNA. And I believe that evolution was specifically built into the universe. It only makes sense. And as we transit this galactic cycle, as we go from one polarity to another polarity and back up again through the various points of density, our DNA starts resonating with the new signal or frequency as the progression of this occurs. And that we move from this 103.5 baseline bell curve to this 105.3, the planet does, and consciousness, all the conscious beings on the planet begin resonating with that new conscious frequency as it rebirths and restarts all over again. And a lot of people just won't make it because they don't have the mental, the spiritual, the physical capacity.
They can't even accept the new frequency.
Agreed. So that's how I
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And I will say one thing, as we're starting to move through these changes, you're going to start to hear and see things that just, it might be out of the glint of your eye. Like you might see something over here. We're like, whoa, what was that? I never saw. The frequency field's going to change. So your visual spectrum should change as well. Your auditory spectrum is going to change as we're moving in through the next, 1.5 to 2 years here. You're going to start, and that might actually make sense of, blend those where suddenly they're in range. And this is, we come back into myth and legend again. Forget the plasma and the squatter man is standing in front of you that just came into visual frequency that you're able to see it, and you will understand what a lot of these ancient stories were about.
100%. This is what our ancestors have been trying to talk to us about, teach us about for the longest time. One of the last things I wanted to talk about is Antarctica. There's a lot of activity going down in Antarctica. Multiple countries have various different treaties down there. Do you think Antarctica is the ark that they're building under the ice to wait out this cataclysmic event?
I think there's multiple points across the planet. Look at Svalbard, the seed repository. So maybe they're trying to split it up. Okay, you take the northern hemisphere, we'll do the southern. One of them will survive.
Right.
But I'm unequivocally saying that this year there's going to be a catastrophic ozone depletion. The way it can be explained simply with science is the Hunga Tonga eruption in January of last year sent 10% more water vapor into our atmosphere in one single day. So we had 100% of precipitable water or clouds or things that could make rain in the atmosphere. And that eruption added 10% to the global total in one day. Now, a huge amount of that in the initial blast went up 30 to 50 miles into the mesosphere, which is above the stratosphere, above the ozone layer, above where most of the weather occurs down here in the troposphere. That layer is a desert layer. It is so dry, it's one of the driest layers until you proceed up into, you get up toward the ionosphere, the upper reaches where it turns into space. Now, This water ejected into there formed these huge, massive, unbelievable amount of ice crystal clouds in the mesosphere. The only problem with that is that's where ozone breaks down in either a chlorine reaction or a bromine reaction occurring on the ice crystal surfaces. The more of those ice crystals there are, the more ozone can be broken down. So you're taking an O3 molecule and stripping off one of the oxygen atoms and recombining it into a chlorine. You get like a ClO variant or a BRO variant, a bromine oxygen variant. And the more ice crystals there are, the more this catalyst can occur. So the more ice crystals equals more ozone breakdown. Now, since 2000, the year 2000 was the lowest and the largest the ozone hole ever was. So the 30 million square kilometers. And if you look at these really wide ozone hole periods, you'll find dropping off a cliff, catastrophic drop off in quote unquote ecological terms of Antarctic sea ice. There is a direct equation on how much UVB gets through there because of depleted ozone on the massive melt of the sea ice. We are going to go so far beyond anything that has ever been measured in terms of ozone reduction and depletion because we are at like a 50 sigma event of the amount of ice crystal clouds in the mesosphere. Now, that's just the science explaining why there's going to be runaway sea ice loss in the southern hemisphere, which they'll probably try to blame on global warming or something. But it's truly that. There's just more UVB that will be allowed in because there's not as much ozone. Well, the part two of that is the UVB is going to just ravage crops across the southern hemisphere. Now, my whole report in January on the opportunity cycle report, which I do also consulting for the dairy industry, they were asking like specific crops in specific regions. So barley will be massively affected by this. And barley is not, a huge global crop like corn or wheat. So barley losses at a minimal level equate to massive rises in food fodder for animals. Because a lot of the barley is used for fodder. Some of it's used for malting barley. Some of it's used for, like us to make breads and different kind of products that come into a supermarket. But the lion's share of that is for fodder, for the, for dairy or any types of animal husbandry where that food silage is required for that. With the wipeout of that and a reduction of at least 40% globally, you're going to watch the prices of barley spike, but you're also going to watch a huge repercussion in animal husbandry get whacked at the knees too, because the input for the feedstock on that is going to reduce whatever output of whether it be milk, whether it be cheese or meat or whatever it is down that and wherever that heads to. That's just one example of what's going to be affected, but overall plant species in general, and also you're going to be looking at altitudes on where these are. So a ground level at zero at sea level will not have the effect that it would up at, say, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet in altitude. The higher altitude you go, the more your crops are going to be wiped out. So then you start to have to look at the altitude where crops are being grown in the southern hemisphere, major crop grow zones in which countries, and then you get the UVB. And then I'll loop you back into, then you can start to look where the outbound field flows are or the outbound current flows are in the southern hemisphere. And you're like, whoa, you're telling me the largest grow zone in Argentina and Brazil, we're already being affected greatly by the current flow outbound bending weather systems there. But now they're going to get this massive UVB damage. And also Western Australia has another outbound current flow that's really been affecting crops. So we're looking at two major grain belts in South America that were previously affected just by the electrical activity of Earth discharging the overcharge, bending the weather systems there and affecting crop production. But now we're going to get into these massive UVB crop losses from radiation damage on the plants. The food shortages are coming, and I've been saying this. Well, when I was really going into this last year with the fertilizer production decreases because of the Russian sanctions, I knew that was it. Right when they hit all the countries and said, you need to stop producing fertilizer because we want to penalize Russia, I was like, that's it. We've rolled over the edge there. And they're trying to disguise the crop losses now to the point where we're coming into a global famine. most governments would be toppled during the famine time. So there's going to be all these distractions since that. It's been less than a year and a half, and we sit at this point now where we're on the brink of a global war, and the crops from this year forward are going to be way less and way less and way less. So thanks for letting me ramble there. I just maybe went over that.
No, it's fantastic information, because I think it's something that people definitely need to hear. We actually run a private social network outside of this, and that's a lot of what we talk about on our private Zooms is like my brother, he homesteads. We got homesteaders that come in and they talk to us and try to tell us and what we should be doing. My big thing is I just moved from Denver, Colorado to Bodunk country, Minnesota. And it went from, living in a city of 100,000 to living in a city of 2,000. And I'm at home here. This is perfect. Even though it's Minnesota, I grew up in the Northeast. I'm okay with the weather. But my next spot is in the next 2 months is to go buy 30 plus acres and then begin getting this ready within a 2-hour drive, because that's all I need, 2 to 3 hour drive from where I currently am, as well as having a community that can organize around it. I was telling people, go out to your butcher, go to a CSA, talk to them. Say, hey, look, if something does happen to the economic system, if society does begin to degrade or collapse, what are the things that you're going to need in a barter and exchange system? These are the type of things that we should be doing right now, making these deals and negotiations, going out there and developing these relationships for when this does happen. We don't need to come up with a plan. All we have to do is execute it.
Yeah, and these communities are going to come together almost instantaneously after this event happens, because you can't tell me you're going to go into a very food lean time, collapsing economy, and people are just going to sit there and go, no, I'm going to stay by myself. Of course not. Just humanity has been through such trials and tribulations over the last 12,000 years alone, let alone the last 400,000 years of glaciation, entry and exit and cataclysms and these sort of thing. Just think about humans are going to come together and people are going to come together to help each other, because our survival is going to be relying on us helping each other. There's no way, shape, it's impossible. I'm absolutely going to say impossible. If you think with just two of you, you're going to survive on your own and grow all your own food and do all these things and fix everything, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You need a good 200 people, around 150 people to share skills to be able to get this. But I'm telling you, absolutely, it is going to happen organically out of the need to stay alive.
Yeah.
That people are going to come together. Now, in the beginning, there's going to be some mischievous characters in there that will be eliminated quite quickly. But after that, like upheaval period, there's going to be a subsidence and a smooth period where people will work together. It's just a lot of elements will need to be eliminated during that transition period who try to overtake or just strong arm resources during that time. And see, that's the whole thing. You're going to have to mentally make these choices before you even get into that situation. You're absolutely going to need to.
Yeah.
But just on the hopeful side, humanity always has and always will come back together again to help each other to survive through. Or else we wouldn't be here with 8 billion people having this conversation hadn't we done that the last 50 of these events. I think it's just the default nature of humanity is to come back in when there's nothing. The economy will mean nothing whether you live in a 50,000 square foot house or if you're living out of a barn you built yourself or whatever. If you're living in your car, it won't even matter. Even if you're homeless, it will not matter at all. You're still alive and you still can contribute. So those kind of socioeconomic things that divide us so much now will mean absolutely zero. You're either going to eat today or you're not. All of us are going to eat today or we will not. And it's going to be about working together to then, bring us through and keep that as a hopeful message, because I have people write in, they just want to check out. I'm like, no, you need to stay here. Please, please, please stay with us. Please stay here. I need you here now, because it's going to be a collective of everybody coming together and just kick this darkness back for another few thousand years once we win this battle and move through and actually reestablish a society that works again with common sense, common law, and, us staying on the side of common sense to run the society versus this clown show that we've wound up in. But again, it could be electromagnetic field changes. It seems like every establishment of history, you hear about it again, whether it's Lemuria or if you want to come to Atlantis. I don't care if you believe in that or not, but the stories remain the same. They came to the ultimate in tech. Their societies dissolved because of immoral behavior and non-commonsensical, currents throughout the entire society, and it just broke apart, ripped and shredded. Now, can we learn something from that alone as we sit in that exact same position today of three previous supposed civilizations all came to their demise under the same exact circumstances, and we sit in the same exact circumstance, but we refuse to acknowledge it?
Spot on, man. I'll tell you, quite a few years ago, over a decade ago, I was told specifically that there's something coming and to survive and to help others survive. Don't try to stop it. You can't stop it. Don't try to interfere with it. You're not going to be able to do anything. Just survive. Because the most important part is being there for humanity after this happens, because people are going to be needed with critical skill sets, with leadership ability to bring back those who are shocked and weak and have no idea what to do, that lack the skills necessary to survive, that people are going to be needed to rebuild society. And this is where we're at. This is where we are. This is where we're at now. We're here. We're at that point.
Yeah, no, we're going to go through the juncture of all these changes here. So, there's only three events that are left to happen before, like, the reestablishment of a new world is, the first one will be this catastrophic ozone loss at the end of the year here. Second, in a very short year following that, we're going to come into this magnetic field anomaly in 2024 as the Earth passes through two looping toroids. After that, the Earth's going to swing out in front of the sun, and whatever's out there, all the gravitational pull from the sun and everything in the entire solar system is directly behind us. So we're going to get whacked with a huge amount of debris. But as we swing back past the sun, then it's kind of it. That's it. The chapter's over. We know that is the chapter of reset. I'm just wondering, all these communities will establish themselves, and, autonomy will be the name of the day. But I'm just wondering when these elitists are going to pop back out from underground with their digital whatever and say, oh no, you were too free, you got to come back under the control system again. It's not going to be immediate. I couldn't really see them in terms of globalists as we understand them today trying to reassert control until past 2030 or so, when communities are still going to need to move through these changes and actually have thriving economies and thriving populations before the control net can be thrown over again. Because a world that is struggling to survive will not accept anything that will interfere with their food growing ability or their ability to trade with others, or their ability to refine their water or hunt or have their own, basic life needs met. Told you can't do that. That's against the law. Nobody will accept that. Mm-hmm. In a struggling new reemergence of humanity, it's going to have to get strong enough before it can be coddled under the wing of control again. So I would say a good 10 years past that. So if we're going to rock into all these events, I would say 2032, 2033, these snakes are going to pop back out from underground and try to reassert control, because there's going to be strong trading communities by that point. This whole thing, and I try to come in with a positive thing, because it won't take but a minute for us to realize the plight we're in, and it's going to take about 3 seconds after that before we organize again. And within a couple of weeks, you already got your food growing back up and running. So it's not like the world's going to collapse and we're going to sit in some Mad Max world where nobody's going to help each other. It's going to be, I think, completely opposite of the brainwashing and messaging that we've gotten out of Hollywood. Like after these post-cataclysmic events, there's all these rogue people running around trying to kill each other, and nothing is functional at that point. I think it's going to be the complete opposite, where once we get into this duress situation, we're going to start helping each other immediately, and we're going to come out with the most thriving communities that we have ever seen after this. But then once it reaches that pinnacle of complete systems of complete autonomy, again, off of any government teat, for a better term, they're going to pop back out and go, no, you got to get back on the government teat again. You need to start buying this. You need to start paying taxes. You need to start doing this. But it's going to be a fair minute until that happens.
That's what I
right. Like,
well, yeah,
we still got ammo, bro.
I think that we've already plugged their air holes. So, we've already plugged their air holes in their underground little houses there. Hopefully, at least by that time. David, this was a fantastic conversation. I'm actually excited to have you back on again here in the near future. This is going to be fantastic. Your website is oilseedcrops.org. Is that correct?
It is. I used to do plantation byproducts that could be then changed into biodiesel. So I would go and follow different types of plantations, and after their initial harvest, what was left over in terms of seeds or this type of thing that could be produced into biodiesel. Now, since that, I haven't really been posting too much. I've been really focused on the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast to get this content out in long form, and the Adapt 2030 channel. It is on YouTube, yes, but it's also on Rumble, and I have the program over on Brighteon TV. Yep. I have a channel on BitChute. I think there's like 20,000 subscribers over there. But it's just trying to get the message out to have conversations like this. And Josh, I'm so glad that we had this, because it gives people, I want to start the conversation, and so do you. It's not about vilifying anybody. It's about, we got a big problem coming in. Not a lot of people are talking about it, and all of us are going to be the solution. It's not going to be a solution. It's going to be a combination of solutions where everybody inputs to find the final outcome of how we can survive through this. And not only just survive. I don't just want to sit here and survive. That's not unacceptable. I want to survive, thrive, and turn this planet into that utopia and that golden era that we all dream of and have heard about for thousands of years, which is going to return. I'm part of that. You're part of that. And that's what we should manifest if we're going to manifest anything.
100%. David Dubine, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Conversation on the Fringe.